Hey, Dani, how are you doing?
Hey, Erwin, always a pleasure. Love seeing that face.
You too, you too. You always brighten up everyone's day, brighten up the day here. It's weather's a little bit crappy here, and I know you guys are going through some snow and sleet there over in Europe as well.
Oh my
So
God. It's like the
that's
never
making
ending winter. It was like just starting to get nice. And then all of a sudden this week is like back to snow, sleet, rain, everything. And it's like,
such is life. Such is life. That's like one of those things where I want to get rid of it, but then no, it's still here, and it's almost spring still. Couple more weeks, couple more weeks. We'll see when it goes away.
I know, I know. Whenever people ask me, like, so what do you miss the most about America or California? Because born and raised California girl. And I'm like, well, I miss my mom. Absolutely miss my mom and my daddy. And the second thing is the weather. Like 9 months of summer, and now I live in a country or an area of Europe where it's like 9 months straight of just awful winter, and it's an adjustment.
Right. No, and thank God that at least, it's almost done. Right. So we'll see. We'll see how much longer it goes into.
Yeah.
So, so it's crazy because we think about like, hey, here we are, we deal with the weather we have, we're down about it, but we try to make the best out of it. And one of the things I was, you know, going through the last week and talking to some folks where some people, I get the sense there's this victimization of stuff that they're going through, right? Now, I'm not saying they're not victims at all and they're not going through anything legitimate, but what I'm saying is, there's this theme that I've listened to folks over the course of the last few months, even more recently, where there's this victim mindset where life happens, right? To you and I or whatever. But then there's also, how do you just transition that to look at it not as a victim, but to a creator mindset where life happens because of us or you, right? And it's the claiming of victim, how to reclaim your personal power back, right? And I think that's what's been missed a lot of this stuff. And I always say, break the cycle of blame, right? The things that I always think about is, are there things where we have to look in the mirror and say, okay, I'm not going to blame you or a situation, even though that is real, but what can I do to control it so I'm reclaiming my power back? And wanted to get your insight on this because your perspective, especially, again, you're overseas, you are a strong-minded woman, you make things happen. What have you seen? What have you observed with folks that do this?
It's something that I do see a lot of on a daily basis. And I think part of it is also just a European state of mind with things where it definitely is, victimization, but there's also like a fear of doing something wrong, especially living in a country like Germany for 15 years where everyone's like a perfectionist. It's like, well, I didn't do it wrong. You did it wrong. And then it's just this victimization of, well, I didn't do anything. It's not my fault, so to say.
Right, right.
And, Erwin, we haven't talked about this yet, but I've spent the majority of my, not even adult life, but of my life in general, I have spent in therapy. And it's not because of crisis or problems. It's because I have wanted to better myself and I have wanted to figure out, why am I the way I am? Why do I think of things the way I do? Why do I take these things on the way that I do? And I do find it very interesting, just even the sentence, what can I change or what can I do better? Just to break, as you're saying, break that cycle of, well, I didn't do it, which is funny actually, because my dad, little anecdote, my dad actually delivered me because he's a doctor. And
Oh,
so he
very cool.
delivered me 36
Well done.
years ago
Well
into
done,
this
Dad.
world. And his family joke has always been, Dani came into the world screaming, it's not my fault. So I have definitely had and phases and years of playing victim and falling into that pattern. And it's so easy to blame other people in a way because it keeps you from taking on that responsibility. But at a certain point, as you grow and as you mature, and if you want to learn about life and about yourself, is really, you're going to have to ask that question of, okay, well, it's not a matter of fault. It's what happened and how can I react? How can I change that? How can I break this cycle? Which unfortunately, I don't feel like a lot of people do. It's a
Yeah,
shame.
no. And by the way, thank you to Dad for do that.
I know
That's
he's the
awesome.
best.
I love that. And no, and then I think, to touch on this, we've all gone through this at some point in our lives or are still going through it, right, Mark? Because I always think about there's stuff where we've had trauma. We've had setbacks that may not have been our fault, right? And we're healing from it still, right? And the responsibility of ours is our future, not the past, right? That's the point of like moving forward. And I think there's these secondary gains that we could identify, like why, for example, think about this. Why does being a victim feel safe? Is it attention, lack of responsibility, excuses for failure? That some people think about, right? Think about that. And then what is the difference between validation and ruminating, right? Like there's always these go-to scapegoats I know I've used before in the past, long time ago, where I said, oh, no, it's my parents' fault. Why this is happening to the economy or my boss or friends. But is it really their fault, right? I mean, of course, everyone plays a part in it, but then how does that impact us, right? You're talking about we live with constant resentment. There's things that stunt our emotional maturity. And like you said, there's things where we've all talked to, experts, therapists, and we get a chance to get their feedback. And then work-wise, right? I know this has happened whenever I've been down and out in the past, and others I've spoken, but there's stagnation, right? If everything is the boss's fault, then you never learn the skills to outgrow the role if we're blaming them. So some people need life coaches as well, or a coach or a mentor to kind of get on that, because it is hard to be alone, right? Then I always say, how do you beat it? Right. And you just said it earlier, right? We have to kind of practice something that I refer to as like extreme ownership, right? Like for a few days or 1 week, apologize for the part of every conflict, even if you only own 5% of it, 2% of it. Here's why. At least you yourself are feeling good about it. You know for damn sure that you did the right thing, but emotional maturity. So I don't know, Dani. I feel like, you're looking in the mirror isn't about blaming yourself. It's about finding the only person who actually has the power to change his or her life.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Something that my therapist in America when I was younger did tell me, which is something I've really, really has just resonated with me, is the idea of staying curious, where it's not even about, okay, this problem occurred or this issue, whose fault is it? But not to think about it like that, but like, okay,
Yeah.
well, what happened and why did it happen? Okay. So let's think about this in a completely different idea, completely different
Right.
mindset, new eyes on it of what happened and why, and how can we avoid this issue in the future, but not even trying to find that blame or finding that scapegoat. Because I think, just touching on what you said before as well, Erwin, I think it's so scary to say it is my fault or I'm wrong or I'm sorry. I think we just as humans, it's really hard. Those are three very hard things to say. And especially when you say it, for example, whether it be in a personal relationship, in a work relationship, it's almost showing like a vulnerability or a weakness, so to say. And I don't think anybody loves that, loves to be weak or so to say. But
Right. Right. And
it's human nature.
it is human nature, right? And we deal with so much, right? There's so much that's pouring on us. There's so much that we carry that sometimes we don't even share those experiences or those mental battles or the weight of the world on our shoulders that we feel with our partners or whoever else that we care about, right? And we should a little more, right? We should have that safe space. And I think, well, let's talk about the mental health, as what you mentioned, right? Like there's this narrative I hear people too, where they don't have to say it, but they feel like in addition to the victimization, they feel that I sense this brokenness, right? People adopted this diagnosis as past hurt as a permanent identity rather than a hurdle to clear, right? And to me, that was powerful because like, it's not a permanent identity. That's a hurdle we just have to clear. We've all gone through our stuff when we were younger, right? We've gone through our stuff today, but how do we clear that hurdle, right? It's not a permanent identity, right? We just have to find the people, the things we need to do and focus on ourselves to improve. But then I would say the identity part versus the experience. And there's a difference here, right? There's some people, in my opinion, that will say, okay, I'm depressed versus some other person that says I'm experiencing depression. Those are two different things, right? Two different things. And again, I'm not a doctor trying to say which one is the clinical term here, but I know that I always kind of feel like I'm down and depressed with all this stuff. But then is that me feeling it or am I experiencing it or am I actually it, right? So I'm not qualified to answer that, but I know when I feel it, I feel fragile, right? Then there's a fragility trap, right? Where am I now overprotecting myself? And if I am overprotect myself, I'm preventing myself from becoming resilient. think about that, right? Because I'm like, okay, I'm going to close off, but then how do I fight? How do I battle to get over it, to clear that hurdle, right? And I think for me, right, Danny, one of the things I've always done is I want to rewrite like my internal script from why me to what now.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think that's stuff that's helped me as far as mental health, and others that I talk to is like, let's do it together. Or, and again, having a support group, right? But, you know, we want to be able to say like, hey, we are looking for things where we're helping, we're being helped to an extent, but then our brain stops looking for the solutions because it assumes none exist. So we have to do it. And we have to reframe, right, Danny? And I wanted to ask you this because
Yes.
for me, I always think of my thoughts like, I'm like, okay, I'm thinking of things as a lawyer. You know, they're arguing, you're claiming you can't do something or something demand evidence. Usually evidence is just, I'm scared.
Hmm.
I know I'm scared at times. So we're the author of our own story, right? We're just not a character, you know, so pick up a pen and start writing.
Right.
I don't know. I know that's a lot of just thoughts from my opinion, but, you know, wanted to share that with you because you brought up some great points with mental health and talking to
No,
people.
it's something that I was raised believing in. You know, both my parents were very open about my sister and I exploring what made us tick, so to say, as teenagers. Because yes, we were handfuls. But also as I've, you know, been older and with all the passing time and experiences, you know, moving to Europe and going through certain just emotional, mental experiences, it's been something that's just really helped me. You
Right,
know, and just also
right,
not
right.
getting lost in the things that have happened to me. And they are things that happen to me, but they don't define me. They are things that I've gone through and that I have experienced. Sometimes more my responsibility, sometimes less my responsibility, but it is my complete responsibility to take a hold of my life and to be like, this is the way that I need it to go, or I'm not going to lose myself down this road. And it's something that I've had to do a few times, and it's absolutely something that I firmly believe in and try every single day to work on. Because it
Yeah.
is so important. It is so
Thank
important.
you. Thank you for being vulnerable to share that, right, Danny? Because we've all gone through some level, and for you with what you opened up with, I mean, I appreciate it, you know, and I think that, you know, that kind of segues into this, right? We've all had, you know, some of us more than others have had relationships to where, you know, we've had experience with other ones that have worked, some that didn't, whatever the case might be. But if you think about this last in closing, right, in the victimization and relationships, the rescue fantasy, so to speak, right? We always think, and it's so funny. I thought about this like when I was growing up, and we growed up in humble beginnings, but I was thinking victims often wait for a hero, right? And which kind of like thinking for me, I was like, damn, you know, hey, I want to not live this kind of life. This is hard. Look at everyone else around me. But then that mindset, although it's supposed to teach and give me something to think about on what I could aspire to be better with. Sometimes there's jealousy. Sometimes there's things where am I supposed to be thinking what I'm thinking? But it creates this toxic dynamics of personal that impacts personal and also eventually professional. And so there's the triangle, right? Moving from like, you know, being a victim or thinking to persecutor to rescuer to coach to challenger to creator, right? Think of all that whole triangle, right? And to me, we become people pleasers, right? And people pleasing sometimes turns into a form of manipulation. Some people have said that before, and I started thinking, I'm like, okay, if I'm sitting here and you're like someone that I feel like, oh, she's saving me, she's giving me all these things, but then I'm going to continue to try to please you in every way I can. But then I'm thinking, am I really being honest or genuine with it? I am. I feel like I am. But sometimes we, as the ones giving it, have to kind of think about that. Like, okay, what am I really doing? You know? So I don't want to manipulate, even though it might be subconscious or unconscious, right? But I think, you know, personally, you know, sometimes too, I know I've seen this with some of my closest friends and people, and even for me in business, sometimes I get attracted to partners who I want to fix, but also it's the other way too. People want to they get attracted to people that they like, that they want to try to fix too. That doesn't mean anything bad or negative, but it does lead to the person that is perceived to needing to be fixed to have codependency. You
That's
know what I mean?
exactly what I was gonna say. Is I was like, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you have a codependent relationship.
And again, who's to say any of this is bad, right? Who's to say? It's just for me, if you want to beat it or if you want to try to get around it, like stop asking for permission to be happy, right? Start making decisions based on your values rather than someone else's reactions, right? You be you, right? And if you're swayed, and spend your time waiting for someone to save you, you'll spend your life in someone else's shadow. So you got to be your own hero, right? So I don't know. Victimhood is a comfortable prison, right? I've heard that before. It's warm. It's never your fault. It's there, but the door is actually unlocked from the inside. And to beat it, you just got to accept the discomfort. And the price of admission is for a meaningful life, right? So
From learning.
yeah,
And it's so important. There's a phrase here in Germany, Austria, where they say you never stop learning. Man lernt nie aus. You never learn out. And it really resonates with me as well, to just, always just try and keep an open mind, always stay tolerant, stay curious.
right,
These are
right.
things that are just, there's no age limit on it. None.
I like that because I always think too, right, Dani, and I love the phrases overseas. I mean, the victim mindset for work, they don't appreciate me. But what's the power mindset to that, right? I will become too good to ignore, right? Work with health. I have bad genetics. How many people have you heard say that at the gym or anywhere else? That's the victim mindset. Power mindset, I will maximize the hand I was dealt. Simple. Only to us, right? And then mental, right? Just everything to recap what we said. Victim mindset, oh, I'm traumatized. Not saying you're not, or people aren't, but then what's the power mindset? I am healing and growing stronger, right? And I always say, the mirror doesn't lie, but it's also not going to judge, but it just shows you that, you already have the tools to have, so be brave enough to use them, so Dani, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. And this is always great to share this with folks, and I appreciate your time today as always.
Of course, Erwin. No, thank you so much. I love being here and having these great talks with you. And it's just, it's good for my soul. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a good day.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.